When we talk about the greatest violinists of all time, Yehudi Menuhin is definitely one that comes up in that list. For some of you, Yehudi Menuhin might be just a figure in the history of violin music, or you've heard of him through the Menuhin competition or the Menuhin school. But Menuhin wasn't just an incredible player, he actually changed the violin world and a whole generation with it. Hey guys, my name is Sumina Studer. I'm your host for Tonebase Violin here on YouTube, and today we're going to be diving into the world of Yehudi Menuhin. We're going to find out who he was, why he became a legend, and why he matters so much to today's violinists, or at least people who love the violin. From the start, Menuhin showed something very special in his playing, making him a child prodigy in a way that is still quite hard to wrap our heads around. He gave his first solo performance at the tender age of 7, and by the age of 11 he was already touring internationally, which is pretty crazy if you ask me. But here's what made him stand out and qualifies him as a prodigy. We have covered this in a previous tonebase video about prodigies, but Menuhin, again, he was not just a technical player, a violin virtuoso in itself, but also additionally he had a specific musicality to it that was way beyond his age. For example, there is this one famous story of him performing Beethoven's Violin Concerto, which us violinists consider as one of the hardest violin concertos to master, and he played that at Carnegie Hall at age 16. It was a performance that went down in history, not because it was flashy, but because it was deeply profound. So what exactly made Menuhin the Menuhin we know today, the legend? Menuhin had what we crave deeply as an audience, which is, of course, spiritual depth and musicality, but also an impressive technical ability. He was certainly not focusing on just playing the notes right, which can quickly become a bit boring, but him as a violinist was very similar to him as a person, which was that he really wanted to say something with his music, he wanted it to have meaning, and he deeply wanted to connect people across borders and cultures. And I'm not just talking about how profound he was as a person, but truly, throughout World War II, for example, Menuhin performed over 500 concerts for Allied soldiers. And after the war, keep in mind his Jewish roots, he did a move that was deeply shocking and a bit provocative to a lot of people. He became the first Jewish violinist to perform with the Berlin Philharmonic under the baton of Wilhelm Furtwängler, just a few years after the Holocaust. Imagine this. You're one of the world's leading, most sought-after, famous Jewish violinists, and just a few years after the horrors of the Holocaust, you go to Berlin and you perform with Wilhelm Furtwängler, who actually conducted under the Nazi regime. Well, Menuhin did exactly that, and while to some people this was a radical act of forgiveness and considered brave and healing, to a lot of people it was an act of betrayal. I mean, what would you have done, you know? It's a tough decision to make, something like this. So at the time, people very heavily criticized him for that, but in Menuhin's eyes, he really believed in healing through music. He saw music as a force of rebuilding communities, even after such traumatic acts. And honestly, that courage, that belief in music's bigger purpose, is why we still talk about Menuhin today. So let's talk about Menuhin's legacy today. He didn't just leave behind recordings, although you should totally listen to his Bach sonatas and partitas. They are incredibly special. Menuhin also built institutions that are still shaping the next generation of violinists. First of all, the Yehudi Menuhin School here in the UK, which was founded in 1963. It's a specialist music school for extremely talented young musicians who travel from all over the world to study at this institution and live there. I believe the students are usually under 18 years old. So you can imagine the dedication and the belief in music that the families as well as the players have. In fact, I almost went to the Menuhin School. It didn't happen in the end, but I heavily considered going there just because it is a top address to study at as a young musician, and I would have been lucky to get in. Then, of course, we have the Yehudi Menuhin violin competition, which is to this day, I would say, one of the most prestigious violin competitions for violinists under 22 years old. That competition has really highlighted and brought out young violinists that are world stars today and have very bright futures ahead of them, such as Christian Lee, Ziyu He, Maria Dueñas, Ray Chen. The list goes on. And as someone who has myself competed in the Menuhin competition before, the beautiful thing about the Menuhin competition is that it's not just a horse race of a competition, but rather a way to build community. There are a lot of extracurricular activities. I still keep in touch with some of the musicians that I was competing against. Yeah, it's really a community building competition, which is not something you hear very often. When you're in the competition, there are masterclasses, there are creative collaborative projects, you play in schools and other communities, and very much in the spirit of Menuhin, it's all about introducing music to different communities. So every time the competition happens, it's in a different city. So this way, it's not only supporting young artists, but also a new generation of different listeners, which I think is pretty cool. I would really love to hear your opinion on this, but for me personally, one of the big indicators that makes me so interested in Menuhin, even way after his passing, is how he combined his artistry with humanity. He wasn't afraid to evolve. And on top of all that, there's the Menuhin who was incredibly into spirituality and yoga. Menuhin went so far as to being so into yoga and believing in it so much that he credited yoga as the reason why he was able to keep playing after years of physical strain. I know a lot of people roll their eyes at stuff like that, but at the same time, I feel like it's more relevant than ever that we take care of ourselves as humans in order to be able to produce beautiful music and be artists. Some critics at the time really thought he was going off the deep end because of all that spirituality. Personally, I definitely think he was onto something because this mind-body connection is actually so important for us musicians. You see it in techniques such as Alexander technique, which is a philosophy of how musicians should use their bodies to make music. Or working out and meditation are so important for the mental and physical well-being of a musician. And actually not just musicians, us as humans. Another thing that I feel like we rarely hear about when it comes to Menuhin is his love for world music. So he collaborated with sitar players, for example, such as Ravi Shankar, way before the idea of cross-genre projects became popular. That curiosity and openness, I feel like, sometimes get lost in the sauce a little bit in today's classical music world, and we shouldn't forget how that can open up so many more paths and creativity in the music world. In short, Menuhin didn't just believe in playing the violin perfectly, and he wasn't a cliché violinist, if you will. To him, and as it should be for a lot of us, it was very much about connecting people, fostering understanding, and to push boundaries, ultimately. So to round it all up, what can we actually learn from Menuhin today? First and foremost, I would say, is be more than just a technician, be an artist with something to say. Second of all, take care of your mind and body. They are part of your playing. And third of all, use music as a way to reach people and their hearts and their feelings, even outside the concert hall. No matter what path of life you are in or on your violin journey you are, Menuhin's legacy was a reminder that it really is about connection and not about perfection. And by all means, if you're looking for inspiration, you absolutely should go listen to his recordings. You can absolutely hear how his influence is still alive in today's violin world. Now, I would love to hear from you what your favorite recordings are by Menuhin, or in what shape or form you've heard about Menuhin. Let's start a discussion in the comment section, and if you haven't liked our video yet, please consider doing so. If you haven't followed us yet and you want more violin content, you know what to do, hit that follow button. I, for one, cannot wait to talk about more violin things with you next time. Bye!